Every morning presents a choice to drift through the day unconsciously, reacting to whatever comes your way, or to rise with intention, clarity, and inner alignment. The way you speak to yourself in the first moments after waking determines the momentum of your entire day. Your thoughts become your actions become your habits, and your habits shape who you become. That is why the morning is not simply a routine, it is a ritual, a sacred opportunity to reset your mind and direct your energy. As you open your eyes each day, the world has not yet placed its weight on your shoulders. In that brief window of silence, your mind is unguarded and your emotions are unshaped. This is the moment when your internal dialogue matters most. If you fill this space with doubt, the day becomes heavy. But if you fill it with strength, clarity, and purpose, the day bows to your intention. The power of the morning lies not in the sun rising, but in you rising with awareness. Many people begin their day already in conflict, thinking about past mistakes, worrying about future problems, or allowing external noise to infiltrate their minds before they have stabilized their internal world. But the one who learns to speak to themselves with discipline and wisdom becomes unshakable. The world does not get lighter, you simply grow stronger. These 8 statements are not affirmations to be repeated mindlessly. They are reminders, guiding principles that bring you back to your center. They help you return to yourself before the world tries to pull you in 100 different directions. When you speak them with presence, you strengthen your internal foundation. The part of you that remains calm when others panic, decisive when others hesitate, focused when others wander. Every morning, you stand at the gate between who you were yesterday and who you can become today. These 8 powerful reminders act as the key to that gate. They ground you in discipline, sharpen your perception, and align you with your purpose. When you repeat them consistently, they begin to transform the way you walk, breathe, think, and act. Do not rush through them. Do not speak them casually. Let each statement sink into your body, your breath, your awareness. You are training the mind, the same way a warrior trains the body, with repetition, focus, and intention. In a world that constantly tries to distract you, mislead you, and pull you off balance, start your day by returning to stillness. Speak to yourself with clarity. Remind yourself of your power. Direct your mind before it directs you. These are the 8 powerful things to tell yourself every morning. 8 reminders that will anchor your spirit, sharpen your discipline, and shape the person you become throughout the day. Your morning mindset sets your daily direction, and this is not just a poetic statement. It is a psychological, emotional, and energetic truth that shapes every action you take from the moment you open your eyes. The mind is most impressionable in the early hours of the day, before the noise of responsibilities, distractions, and interactions begins to pull you in different directions. When you wake up, your brain is shifting from the subconscious world of dreams into conscious awareness. This transition creates a unique window where your thoughts carry exceptional influence. Whatever you feed your mind in this state becomes the foundation upon which the rest of your day is built. If your first thoughts are negative, chaotic, rushed, or filled with self-doubt, your body and emotions will follow that rhythm. You will notice that the entire day feels heavier, decisions are harder, patience is shorter, and motivation is low. This is not because circumstances are inherently difficult, but because you began the day without alignment. The mind reacted to the world instead of preparing for it. A restless beginning leads to a restless continuation. But when your morning mindset is deliberate, steady, and grounded, everything shifts. You no longer drag yourself through the hours. You move with intention. You no longer respond impulsively. You respond with clarity. You no longer feel controlled by circumstances. You feel capable of directing your path. Your morning mindset is the compass that determines whether your day drifts aimlessly or moves with purpose. Many people underestimate how sensitive the mind is in the morning. They wake up and immediately grab their phone, flooding their awareness with messages, notifications, opinions, and noise. Before they even take their first breath with intention, they have already allowed the world to shape their thoughts. They start their day already behind, overwhelmed, or distracted, not realizing that the first 5 minutes after waking can influence the next 15 hours. The morning is not simply the beginning of the day, it is the moment you decide who you are going to be for the next 24 hours. Will you be reactive or composed? Will you be disciplined or careless? Will you be driven or aimless? These decisions are not made consciously throughout the day. They are silently set in the morning by the tone of your thoughts. Your mindset in the morning also determines the emotional temperature you carry with you. If you begin the day feeling grateful, strong, and centered, your emotional resilience increases. Stressful situations feel less threatening because you started from a place of strength. Challenges do not shake you as easily because your mind is already anchored. However, if you begin with anxiety, frustration, or negative internal dialogue, even small problems feel heavier, and you are more easily pulled out of balance. This shows that your morning mindset does not only set direction, it sets endurance. It affects how much pressure you can handle, how well you recover from setbacks, and how much energy you bring into each task. A strong morning mindset is like starting your day with a charged battery. A weak one is like beginning the day already depleted. Another important aspect of the morning mindset is the clarity it provides. When you start your day intentionally, your priorities become visible. You know what matters and what does not. You can focus on actions that move you forward instead of getting lost in distractions. Without this clarity, the day becomes cluttered. You waste time on tasks that drain you instead of tasks that elevate you. The mind, when left unchecked in the morning, becomes scattered, but when directed with intention, it becomes sharp. The early hours of the day give you the chance to access mental silence, a rare state in modern life where the noise has not yet reached you. In this silence, you can see your goals more clearly. You can hear your intuition more strongly. You can feel your purpose more deeply. This clarity is one of the greatest strengths a person can have, and it is cultivated at the start of the day. Your morning mindset also trains your discipline. When you choose to control your first thoughts, you strengthen your inner authority. You prove to yourself that the mind works for you, not the other way around. This quiet decision, repeated daily, builds enormous mental strength. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to rely on your own clarity rather than the influence of others. This self-trust becomes the root of confidence, resilience, and growth. Every morning you are given the chance to choose your identity, not in a dramatic or external way, but in the subtle space of thought where your true patterns take shape. The words you tell yourself, the emotions you allow, and the focus you bring forward become the blueprint of your behavior for the rest of the day. Your morning mindset sets your direction because it sets your internal state, and your internal state shapes every decision, reaction, and action that follows. Self-discipline begins with intentional self-talk, and this truth reaches deeper than most people realize. Discipline is not built in the gym, in the workplace, or in moments of pressure. Discipline begins in the quiet spaces of the mind, often before you even take your first step out of bed. The way you speak to yourself determines the way you act, because every action is preceded by a thought, and every thought is influenced by the internal language you choose. If your inner dialogue is unclear, weak, or filled with excuses, your discipline will collapse the moment difficulty appears. But if your self-talk is steady, firm, and intentional, you create a mental structure that supports disciplined action consistently. Intentional self-talk does not mean repeating empty motivational slogans. It is the practice of aligning your thoughts with your purpose, your goals, and your principles. Most people lose discipline not because they lack ability, but because their mind sabotages them before they begin. They tell themselves that they are tired, unprepared, incapable, or overwhelmed, and these internal statements shape their behavior. The mind believes what you consistently tell it, whether those words are empowering or destructive. Discipline cannot grow in an environment of self-doubt, negative predictions, or mental laziness. It grows in an environment where your self-talk reinforces your strength rather than your weakness. When you speak to yourself with intention, you begin to train your mind the same way a warrior trains the body. You learn to recognize unhelpful thoughts and replace them with ones that support your direction. You learn to stop negotiating with your excuses and begin guiding your inner dialogue toward action. This internal guidance is the source of discipline. It teaches your mind to follow your command instead of obeying impulses, emotions, or fear. People often imagine discipline as a sudden surge of motivation or a forceful push, but in reality, discipline is the mastery of subtle internal conversations repeated daily. Intentional self-talk creates a mental structure that keeps you aligned even when circumstances change. Without guidance, the mind reacts automatically to discomfort, choosing the easiest path. It looks for reasons to delay, avoid, or quit. But when self-talk becomes intentional, you override those tendencies. You create a mental voice that reminds you of your purpose, your commitment, and the standards you have chosen. This voice becomes the anchor that stabilizes you when the mind tries to retreat into comfort. Self-discipline is also deeply connected to awareness. When you pay attention to the words you use internally, you become conscious of how your mind behaves. Most people are unaware of how often they speak to themselves in ways that weaken them. They criticize themselves unnecessarily, predict failure before trying, or lower their expectations because of past experiences. These patterns quietly erode discipline. To change them, you must first observe them. You recognize these negative internal habits. You can challenge them, redirect them, and replace them with intentional self-talk that strengthens your resolve. Another crucial aspect of intentional self-talk is its ability to regulate emotion. Emotions are powerful forces that often disrupt discipline. When you feel unmotivated, frustrated, overwhelmed, or discouraged, discipline becomes harder to sustain. Intentional self-talk allows you to stabilize these emotions. It does not deny them, but it directs them. Instead of saying, "I can't handle this," you say, "I can take one step." Instead of saying, "This is too much," you say, "I will focus on what I can control." This shift in language shifts your emotional state. And when your emotions stabilize, your capacity for disciplined action increases. Self-discipline is also strengthened by the consistency of intentional self-talk. Every time you choose strong, purposeful, internal language, you reinforce a mental pathway. Over time, these pathways become automatic. Your mind begins to default to resilience instead of avoidance, clarity instead of confusion, action instead of hesitation. This is how discipline becomes a natural part of who you are, rather than a temporary effort. It is built through repetition and reinforced daily through the way you speak to yourself. Intentional self-talk also acts as a filter that protects your discipline from external influence. The world is full of distractions, pressures, and opinions that can easily pull you off course. Without a strong internal dialogue, you become vulnerable to these external forces. But when your self-talk is grounded in intention, you maintain your focus within yourself. You do not rely on approval, motivation, or external validation. Instead, your discipline comes from your own voice, calm, steady, and centered, no matter what happens around you. Another important dimension is how intentional self-talk strengthens your identity. Discipline is not only about behavior, it is about who you believe yourself to be. If your internal dialogue reinforces a weak identity, your actions will reflect that. But if your self-talk affirms strength, resilience, and capability, your actions naturally follow. When you consistently tell yourself that you are someone who follows through, someone who stays committed, someone who rises above excuses, your identity shifts. And once identity shifts, discipline becomes a natural expression of who you are. Ultimately, intentional self-talk allows you to take ownership of your mind. When you conquer all the words you feed yourself, you control the direction of your thoughts, the quality of your emotions, and the strength of your discipline. Inner clarity must come before external action, because without clarity, every step you take becomes a reaction rather than a direction. When the mind is clouded, distracted, or scattered, even the most determined effort loses its power. People often rush into activity hoping that movement alone will produce progress, but action without clarity is like walking in a fog. You may be moving, but you do not know if you are moving towards something meaningful or simply moving to avoid standing still. Inner clarity is the internal compass that ensures your energy flows in the right direction instead of leaking into tasks, emotions, or habits that do not serve your growth. Clarity begins with understanding yourself, your intentions, your values, your priorities, and your emotional state. Many people never pause long enough to ask themselves what they truly want or why they want it. They wake up and immediately become absorbed in tasks, responsibilities, messages, expectations, and noise. The mind becomes tangled before it has a chance to breathe. This lack of clarity leads to frustration, indecision, and mental exhaustion. Because the mind is constantly trying to navigate without a map, you cannot expect consistent progress when your internal world is in conflict. Inner clarity requires stillness, not necessarily a long meditation or a perfectly quiet room, but a moment where you allow your mind to settle before you move. When you slow down enough to listen to your thoughts rather than react to them, you begin to see what is unnecessary, what is emotional residue, and what is truly important. Without this inner filtration, your actions will be driven by impulse, stress, or external influence. Clarity gives you the ability to act from intention instead of pressure. Another dimension of inner clarity is emotional alignment. Emotions are powerful forces that can distort your perception if left unexamined. When you are angry, everything seems urgent. When you are anxious, everything feels overwhelming. When you are exhausted, everything appears harder than it is. These states can easily pull you into decisions or actions that do not reflect your true desires. But when you create clarity before acting, you separate temporary emotion from long-term direction. You recognize that not every feeling deserves a reaction. You recognize that not every thought is a command. You choose to act from awareness rather than emotion. Clarity also strengthens decision-making. A person without clarity hesitates, doubts, and second-guesses themselves, not because they lack ability, but because their mind is divided. When your thoughts are not aligned, every option feels like a risk, and every choice feels like it might lead to regret. But when your inner world is clear, decisions become easier. You see your path without forcing it. You know what to prioritize without confusion. You move with confidence, not because you are certain of the outcome, but because you are certain of yourself. Inner clarity creates efficiency. When you know what truly matters, you stop wasting time on things that do not. You stop chasing approval, distractions, or tasks that offer no real growth. You conserve your energy for what aligns with your purpose. This focus is the foundation of productivity, but more importantly, it is the foundation of inner peace. A clear mind does not feel overwhelmed by the weight of daily life because it is not carrying unnecessary mental clutter. Clarity is not about having fewer responsibilities. It is about having fewer internal conflicts. Clarity also gives you the ability to adapt without losing yourself. Life will present challenges, unexpected events, and difficult moments. And without clarity, these moments can throw you off balance. But when your inner world is steady, external changes do not shake you as deeply. You can adjust your actions while maintaining the direction of your purpose. This is the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is immediate and emotional. Response is aware and intentional. Clarity creates the space needed to respond. Another essential aspect of inner clarity is self-honesty. Many people avoid clarity because it requires facing uncomfortable truths. It requires acknowledging habits that are holding you back, emotions you have ignored, or goals you have abandoned. It requires admitting where you are undisciplined or unfocused. But this honesty is what sets you free. Without it, your actions will always be based on avoidance rather than progress. Clarity demands courage, but it also provides strength. When you see yourself clearly, you can improve yourself deliberately. Inner clarity also protects you from external influence. When the mind is unclear, it becomes vulnerable to opinions, criticism, and expectations from others. You may start living according to someone else's standards instead of your own. But when clarity is present, you stand firmly within yourself. You are not easily swayed because you know what aligns with your values. You walk your path with calm conviction, rather than seeking direction from the outside world. When clarity comes first, action becomes powerful. Your steps are intentional, your efforts are meaningful, and your energy is directed rather than dispersed. Clarity transforms work into purpose, movement into progress, and discipline into a natural expression of who you are. Consistent morning reminders strengthen mental resilience because the mind, like the body, grows stronger through repetition. Mental resilience is not something that appears suddenly in moments of crisis. It is built quietly through small habits practiced every single day. The thoughts you reinforce each morning become the mental armor you wear throughout the day. They shape the way you respond to challenges, how quickly you recover from setbacks, and how deeply you stay connected to your goals. When these reminders are repeated consistently, they do not remain simple words. They become internal truths that guide your behavior automatically. Many people think resilience is a natural trait, something you either have or do not have. But resilience is a trained ability. It emerges from the way you condition your mind to interpret obstacles, failures, and difficulties. Morning reminders act as mental conditioning. They prepare your mind before stress arrives, before challenges appear, before emotions become overwhelming. Instead of reacting unpredictably, you develop a stable internal foundation that remains firm even when external circumstances shift. Morning reminders strengthen resilience because they create mental alignment. When you begin your day with clear, intentional thoughts, you align your emotions, your expectations, and your energy. This alignment reduces internal conflict, which is one of the biggest obstacles to resilience. A mind torn between conflicting thoughts or unexamined fears becomes fragile. A mind that begins the day with clarity becomes steady. This steadiness is the root of resilience. Another way morning reminders build resilience is through repetition. Repetition is not simply a practice, it is transformation. The brain learns through recurring patterns. When you repeatedly remind yourself of strength, discipline, patience, gratitude, or purpose, your mind begins to default to these states automatically. Over time, these reminders become mental habits. Habits are powerful because they operate even when motivation is low or emotions are unstable. When resilience becomes a habit, you do not have to force yourself to recover. You naturally return to a balanced state. Consistent reminders also help you regulate your internal state before external stress enters your life. Many people wake up and immediately get pulled into tasks, messages, or responsibilities, leaving no space for mental grounding. Without grounding, even small challenges feel heavier because the mind is already in a reactive state. Morning reminders, however, shift the mind into a proactive state. They help you enter the day with awareness instead of tension. When you are aware, difficulties do not destabilize you as easily. You remain centered because you prepared your mind before the world challenged it. Another essential aspect is that morning reminders shape your self-belief. Resilience depends heavily on how you view yourself. If you begin your day thinking you are overwhelmed, incapable, or unlucky, your resilience weakens. But if you remind yourself of your ability, your discipline, and your capacity to grow, your internal narrative becomes empowering. Self-belief is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in the quiet dialogue you have with yourself at the start of each day. Your mind listens to you. It becomes what you repeatedly tell it. Resilient thoughts create a resilient identity, and a resilient identity creates resilient actions. Morning reminders also serve as a daily reset. Life brings moments of frustration, disappointment, and emotional heaviness. Without a reset, these accumulated emotions weigh down the mind and weaken resilience over time. Morning reminders clear mental residue. They allow you to start each day with a fresh perspective instead of carrying the emotional weight of yesterday. When the mind is reset daily, resilience becomes easier to maintain because you are not fighting old battles while facing new ones. Another important dimension is how morning reminders reinforce discipline. Resilience and discipline are closely linked. Discipline gives you the strength to continue even when your emotions resist. Morning reminders strengthen this connection. When you remind yourself of your intentions every morning, you reinforce the discipline needed to follow through. This consistency trains your mind to stay committed even when motivation fades. Discipline provides the structure, and resilience provides the strength. Together, they form a powerful combination that grows through daily mental repetition. Morning reminders also sharpen emotional awareness. When you consciously direct your thoughts each morning, you become more aware of your emotional patterns. You notice what feels heavy, what feels unclear, and what needs attention. This awareness prevents emotional overwhelm because you address feelings before they accumulate. Resilience is not just about enduring stress, it is about managing your emotions so stress does not control you. Morning reminders create this emotional management by making you more conscious of your inner state. Finally, consistent morning reminders create inner stability. Stability is the foundation of resilience. When your mind is stable, problems do not knock you off balance as easily. You recover faster, think more clearly, and remain composed even when faced with pressure. Stability does not come from external circumstances, it comes from internal repetition. The more consistently you remind yourself of who you are and how you choose to show up, the more unshakable your mind becomes. You shape your day by shaping your first thoughts because the direction of your mind determines the direction of your actions. The very first thoughts that rise in your awareness wake up, act as silent architects, influencing how you feel, how you behave, and how you interpret everything that happens afterward. Most people underestimate the power of these early thoughts. They assume the day shapes them, not realizing that they shape the day long before it begins. The quality of your first thoughts becomes the internal atmosphere that colors every experience you encounter. When your first thoughts are intentional, calm, grounded, and focused, you create a mental environment that supports clarity and strength. But when your first thoughts are random, reactive, or negative, your mind becomes unsettled before the day has even started. The mind is most impressionable in the morning. It absorbs these early thoughts effortlessly, allowing them to set the emotional tone. A single negative thought upon waking can ripple through your entire day, influencing your energy, decisions, and interactions. This happens subtly, often without awareness, which is why shaping your first thoughts consciously is one of the most powerful mental practices you can develop. Your early thoughts act as a filter. If they are filled with doubt or worry, the mind begins scanning the world for things that confirm those doubts. If your thoughts are filled with strength or purpose, the mind begins scanning for opportunities to express those qualities. This filtering effect happens automatically. The brain is wired to follow what you focus on, and your first focus of the day becomes the path your mind continues to follow. By choosing your first thoughts with intention, you guide the mind toward a path aligned with discipline and inner clarity. Another reason shaping your first thoughts is powerful is because these thoughts set your emotional baseline for the day. Everyone experiences stress, unexpected problems, or emotional fluctuations, but your baseline determines how you respond to them. A person whose first thoughts are chaotic will find challenges more overwhelming. A person whose first thoughts are grounded will find the same challenges manageable. Emotional resilience begins with emotional grounding, and grounding begins with your first internal dialogue. When your initial thoughts stabilize you, your reactions throughout the day become more balanced and intentional. Your first thoughts also influence the strength of your focus. In a world full of distractions, your focus is constantly being pulled in multiple directions. If you start the day with a scattered mind, your focus becomes fragile. Your attention drifts easily and productivity becomes inconsistent. But when your first thoughts are centered on clarity, purpose, or calm awareness, you strengthen your ability to direct your focus instead of allowing distraction to control you. This early mental alignment gives you a sense of direction that carries into your tasks, conversations, and decisions. Shaping your first thoughts also strengthens self-control. The ability to control impulses, manage emotions, or stay aligned with your goals begins with your relationship to your mind. If your first thoughts are intentional, you practice self-control before the day even starts. You choose your thoughts instead of letting them choose you. This is mental training at its most subtle and powerful level. It sends a message to the mind that you are in command. Over time, this practice cultivates a deeper sense of discipline because you have trained your mind to follow your lead rather than react automatically. Another important dimension is that your first thoughts shape your identity for the day. Identity is not a fixed state. It is continually reinforced by the thoughts you repeat. When your first thoughts reinforce doubt, fatigue, or avoidance, you embody these states throughout the day. But when your first thoughts reinforce strength, willingness, and capability, you step into the identity of someone who lives by intention. Identity drives behavior. When you choose thoughts that affirm the person you want to be, your actions naturally reflect that identity. Shaping your first thoughts also influences the way you interpret external events. The same situation can feel like a challenge or a burden, depending on the state of your mind. When you begin with strong, intentional thoughts, you interpret events with a sense of agency. You remain centered even when things do not go according to plan. But when your first thoughts are unfocused or negative, you interpret events emotionally rather than clearly. You take things personally, react with frustration, or lose energy quickly. The ability to maintain inner balance is rooted in the tone set by your first thoughts. Your first thoughts create momentum. Every day carries a certain rhythm, either scattered or focused, slow or purposeful, reactive or disciplined. When you intentionally shape your first thoughts, you decide the rhythm before anything else can influence it. This momentum builds throughout the day, making it easier to stay consistent, motivated, and aligned with your intentions. Ultimately, shaping your first thoughts is the practice of choosing how you want to show up in your life. It is a daily act of directing your mind rather than drifting through the day without awareness. When you choose your first thoughts with purpose, you shape your emotions, your focus, your resilience, and your identity. You become the RCE that sets the direction of your day rather than being shaped by external circumstances.